I have to imagine that thousands of years of war started when Namor wouldn't share his wing shoe things.
This is what the wings are for,
Atlantis and Wakanda, the modern-day warring families who represent one of the greatest tumultuous relationships in all of Marvel Comics. They've had a very long history of competition and are led by two of the strongest leaders in the pages of the comic books.
Should we bow?
T'Challa on one side, Namor the Sub Mariner on the other. Two of the most advanced civilizations on the planet Earth constantly at odds with each other makes for some great content. And the MCU is about to bring this confrontation to the forefront, likely with its own MCU twist.
We don't do that here.
So what is this complicated history behind this even more complicated relationship? Let's find out right now. Both Wakanda and Atlantis are ancient civilizations. They have extremely old roots that go back far beyond their original conflict. So let's set the scene. Just what are these ancient origins of these two incredibly advanced civilizations? We'll start with Wakanda, mostly because I'm not a great swimmer and much more comfortable on land. Wakanda is a nation built by tribes a very long time ago on the back of a meteor impact that contained one of the most precious metals that would ever come to be known in the Marvel Universe. This material was, of course, the precious metal vibranium. The primitive tribes began to learn how to use and manipulate this metal in all sorts of ways, including weaponry, but also forms of energy and clothing. The Kingdom of Wakanda is made up of several different tribes who each oversee an aspect of life, and some tribes who disagreed with the decisions of the ruling ones. However, amongst these disagreeing tribes, a single leader emerged. The vibranium meteorite that struck the ground of Wakanda began to grow a plant known as a heart-shaped herb. This plant contained incredible properties, having been infused with the space metal. The leader of one of these tribes, a man by the name of Bashanga, not only investigated the crash site, but also consumed the heart-shaped herb. This transformed him into the first Black Panther, a mighty warrior whose speed, agility, strength, and ferocity surpassed those of even the greatest jungle predators. Bashanga began to build Wakanda, but kept their secret discovery in isolation so that nations around the world would not get their hands on this oh-so-precious unnatural resource. Bashanga would rule the country for a long time, and his heirs would go on to rule it for even longer. This was true all the way up until present day, when their leader T'Challa, who had taken over both roles of King and the Black Panther, decided to open up Wakanda to the rest of the world.
With all due respect, King T'Challa, what can a nation of farmers have to offer the rest of the world?
Throughout history, some outsiders found their way into the country, and even tried to steal the precious vibranium, which at the time was likely the most valuable material on the planet. But they quickly learned that the Wakandans were preparing for any threat long before they were even born. Their best defense systems and cloaking technology allowed the greatly advanced nation to hide, and secretly advance their society further without anyone from the outside assuming they were anything more than a third world country. Captain America had had a run-in with T'Challa's father, King T'Chaka, back in World War II, revealing the Black Panther to one of Earth's mightiest heroes as an equal. The Wakandan nation are a proud people, and there are few forces on the planet Earth that could even hope to match them in terms of strength and power. However, there is one equally ancient and equally advanced society who possibly could. Unlike the Wakandans, who forged their great society thanks to resourceful human beings, the Kingdom of Atlantis came about in a much more traditionally powerful way. Atlantis was a country chosen by Zeus, the god of thunder, as the housing place for Atlas, general of the Titans, who was condemned to hold the heavens above his very head for the rest of time. However, originally Atlantis was nothing more than a land of barbarians and vicious warriors who hunted each other and their enemies.
I am Namor, Prince of Atlantis. Any who enter the waters will face my wrath. Imperius Rex!
Much like Wakanda, they were originally made of several autonomous tribes, and had many wars and battles with other ancient civilizations, including Volusia, Camoria, and Lemuria. However, over time, like many ancient civilizations, they grew and became more advanced. Sailors, traders, scientists, and artists came to this civilization and helped it advance through the ancient years. Then one day, well, let's just say it all went south. The Celestials, responsible for creating the Eternals and the Deviants, some of the strongest beings on the planet, were known to come back and visit their creations from time to time. During the second host of the Celestials' visits, the angry creators caused what came to be known as the Great Cataclysm. This cataclysm ravaged the Earth with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on scales no one at the time had seen before. What it also managed to do was sink two of the most advanced civilizations of the time, Lemuria and Atlantis, quite literally, to the bottom of the sea, and they vanished beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Apparently after this, magical beings from space gifted the city with magic, which helped the humans of Atlantis learn to adapt to undersea life and even breathe water. Much like Wakanda, they advanced, unbeknownst to the rest of the world. I mean, who's going to search the bottom of the ocean for new friends? Throughout this ancient time, while Wakanda was seeing their change in leadership, several rulers came and went throughout Atlantis history. Eventually, Atlantis would see one of its most popular rulers come to the throne, the great Namor the Sub Mariner. Namor had made contact with the surface world far beyond any who had preceded him. He protected Atlantis from great threats, including the gods of Athens. They developed weaponry and resources no other civilization could possibly hope to have due to their new unique living situation. Needless to say, this advanced society was more than willing to do battle with anyone whom they saw fit. These two kingdoms with two very similar yet extremely different origin stories were bound to come to a head at one point or another. And trust me, when they did, it was spectacular, to the point where now seeing it in live action is a dream come true for any longtime comic readers. But just what exactly caused the initial conflict between Wakanda and Atlantis? Each of these incredibly advanced kingdoms were ruled by great people, who would eventually go on to become superheroes and protectors of Earth, not just of their own countries. However, they tend to be a little, stubborn? Yeah, I think it's safe to say.
And now you will listen to me.
I say I'm the tough one.
Their personalities were very different, and they ruled in very different ways, though those ways proved effective for each of their respective kingdoms. T'Challa is known to be a very philosophical and level-headed king, often waiting to attack enemies and instead preparing to defend Wakanda instead of inciting conflict. He always wants what is best for his people, and will take the hard road in order to get it.
Wakanda forever!
Namor, on the other hand, is a bit of a hard-headed numbskull sometimes. He tends to be very rough around the edges, and will seek out conflict even if just for revenge. He believes his kingdom and his warriors to be the strongest there are, which has led to a bit of a cocky personality to say the least. Because of these two clashing personalities, these great civilizations wound up going to war on multiple occasions. Weirdly enough, Black Panther and Namor did not first meet each other as the kings of their respective societies. They were not yet adult superheroes with fully formed superpowers, but instead they were kids who still had full control over a wildly advanced civilization. They began working together and even tracked down criminals who fled Atlantis to the nation of Wakanda, both working to keep their respective societies peaceful. They're not dumb, they realized how similar each of their kingdoms were, and how they could be threats to each other in the future. Though they parted this early adventure on good terms, it's safe to say that each kept an eye out for the other from that point going forward. It was Black Panther especially who was known for being very future-oriented, and scouting out threats to the possible sanctity of Wakanda long before they even became threats. He obviously recognized the deadly potential that the Atlantean people could have against his kingdom. He naturally started creating emergency plans should the people of the deep ever decide to attack those dwelling on land. Obviously, given the content of this very video, his fears definitely weren't unfounded. However, they did do a lot of heroing together before they actually became mortal enemies. They served on the Illuminati together, a coming together of some of the most brilliant minds on Earth. They fought off more criminals, supervillains, and even Dr. Doom. However, this tumultuous peace was destined to shatter at some point. The first time these two nations clashed, interestingly enough, was over control of a very powerful force in the universe. The mythical Phoenix Force, which had inhabited members of the X-Men and had caused untold destruction, thanks to its nearly uncontrollable power, and it was up for grabs. This caused one of the greatest conflicts in the pages of Marvel Comics, as the Avengers fought to destroy the Phoenix Force, while the X-Men fought to keep it alive, as they feared it would lead to the extinction of their race. Namor the Sub Mariner backed the side of the X-Men, while T'Challa of Wakanda had the Avengers' backs. After their first fight, the Avengers were overpowered by the X-Men and retreated to Wakanda for safety. Once Namor had heard of this, he decided that Wakanda was now harboring fugitives against mutant kind, and saw the only possible solution to be invasion. It was a surprise attack that definitely had devastating effects on Wakanda, and created a rivalry between two of the strongest leaders in Marvel Comics that would pretty much go on forever. The most interesting thing about this rivalry that differs it from so many other superhero rivalries is the fact that they are backed by an entire kingdom of people, allowing them to go to war whenever they please. However, they are able to put aside their differences when they need to. Black Panther and Namor have been members of the Illuminati together, and not that that group has a great track record, but the fact of the matter is they can work together when they need to. After the Avengers vs. X-Men conflict ended, the two leaders, though with great hate for each other, were forced to reconcile their differences due to a common conflict. A coming incursion forced all the heroes of Earth to work together to try and find a solution. While Namor and T'Challa were breaking bread, another person sought to take advantage of Namor's believed ceasefire. Shuri, the sister of T'Challa and eventual Black Panther herself, wanted revenge for the initial invasion that Namor had launched against her people. Using the incursion and the newly formed Illuminati as a distraction, Shuri led her own secret invasion into the underwater kingdom of Atlantis. The forces of Wakanda absolutely decimated the people of Atlantis, similar to what the Atlanteans had done during their initial invasion. Namor took this attack as another declaration of war, and thus the two nations went at it yet again. During this time, Namor had been making some questionable allies, least of which included Thanos and the Black Order. Being the wise, socially manipulative leader that he was, Namor tricks Thanos into believing that he needed to invade Wakanda. Thanos unleashed an attack on both the people of Wakanda and Atlantis, and forced them into even greater conflict with each other. T'Challa and Namor would even battle one-on-one several times, and even in spite of the oncoming threat, the two fought like there was no end. Eventually, T'Challa gets the upper hand and stabs Namor, even throwing him into a parallel universe. This is a large and bloody history of two comic nations who are now finally bringing their ancient rivalry to the big screen. They're both proud, wise, and tactically brilliant leaders, meaning that when the pride of their nation is at stake, there's nothing that will stop them from tearing each other down. So, all that sounds pretty fun, don't you think? Now imagine it in glorious high-definition 3D. Yes, that's right, in the Black Panther sequel, Wakanda Forever, we will finally see these two nations come to blows. But what could this possibly look like given the current state of the MCU? First of all, a lot is going to have to be different from the comics. Namor will not be able to have his traditional rivalry with T'Challa, as unfortunately that character will not be around. However, whoever takes T'Challa's place, whether it be Shuri, Okoye, Nakia, or anyone else, could easily develop a similar rivalry with the leader of Atlantis. It seems as though the storyline of the Black Panther sequel will see the nation of Wakanda vulnerable to outside attacks, not only because they have lost their leader, but also because they are dealing for the first time of the ramifications of their exposing themselves to the world. This would be a perfect time for Namor or anyone else really to attack, for whatever reason. We've already seen the Celestials' interference on Earth in the film Eternals, which means we could get flashbacks to their second host that sunk the city of Atlantis. The civilization could have grown and flourished for thousands of years, leading to their powerful position today, where perhaps they are also tired of hiding from the rest of the world, maybe even at the example of T'Challa. With the coming threat of incursions, we could see a storyline very similar to the time Shuri invaded Atlantis. Perhaps the two nations initially reach out to each other wanting to make peace, and come together to stop the threat of the oncoming possibility of world-ending events. But there is just something in the blood of these two civilizations that refuses to allow them to get along. Shuri and her mother, the Queen, may believe that Atlantis is planning to take over the resources of Wakanda and instead plan a counterattack. This would lead to these two nations in all-out war, which we will likely see in the upcoming Black Panther sequel. But what happens after that? Sure, the MCU has a habit of sometimes killing off villains who play larger parts in future stories in the comics, but I don't think they will do that with Namor. He's not really a traditional villain and often sometimes serves as one of Earth's mightiest heroes. So I think it's more likely that the conflict will come to an understanding as opposed to one side decimating the other. I think we will leave Wakanda Forever with Atlantis and Wakanda in a tumultuous allyship, preparing for the oncoming of something possibly worse, such as Kang, Doctor Doom, or even a future Secret Wars. In the comics, T'Challa and Namor are reluctantly teamed up during the Secret Wars event. They go on multiple side quests and even come into possession of the fully formed Infinity Gauntlet. They also use it to raise an army of Marvel zombies to eventually attack Doctor Doom, and I just want to say I'd really do anything to see that happen before my very eyes. These efforts don't work though, because Doom has reached a level of power where no one can touch him, but the attack actually results in T'Challa being sent back in time, seemingly resetting all of the events that caused the incursion in the first place. You could easily swap out T'Challa for Shuri in this instance, meaning that after they have gone to war, we could be forced to watch these two team up in an attempt to stop the multiverse villains of the multiverse saga. There's also the concept of the Illuminati, which may have been teased as more of a joke in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but still could definitely appear true to form in the main 616 timeline, especially with rumors of coming stories. We just witnessed the Hulk leave Earth in She-Hulk, possibly hinting at the setup of his return as the Worldbreaker Hulk seeking revenge against the Illuminati. Now, obviously, we've missed the whole shooting him into space part, but the new Illuminati that forms could very well do something that causes the man to lose his temper for the first time in years. Now, granted, the specific Illuminati in the World War Hulk storyline was a little different in terms of their members, but Shuri and Namor could easily take up 2 of the traditional 6 spots. Overall, T'Challa was set up to be one of the greatest leaders in the universe going forward after the death of Iron Man, but I think the Black Panther sequel will see a worthy successor to the once great king, and introduce another character worthy of the title of the King of Atlantis. But for all we know, these trailers could be a total misdirect, am I right? Maybe Queen Ramonda and Namor go way back, and instead of fighting each other, it's just a 2-hour and 41-minute movie about them catching up since they last saw each other in college. Truth be told, I think we're in for a great rivalry of the MCU, and one that will be unlike any we have seen before. Which nation do you think will come out on top when the two go to war in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever?